The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
Dumb sister actually believes she's some kind of hero. Paying for my gown is the only decent thing she's ever done. Her cash belongs to me, her possessions are mine too. Those sentences leaked through the door of the bridal room while my mother just chuckled. I glanced down at my banking app. $0. I didn't utter a single syllable. I just put the heavy steamer on the rug and walked out. My brain, which is trained as a financial analyst to look at risks, had already reached a conclusion. The wedding was starting in half an hour. I wasn't going to sit in those chairs. I was going to sell everything off. Have you ever been the cash machine for a family that treats you like a maid? Tell me your experiences in the comments. To understand why I didn't yell, you have to know what I gave up to be in that hallway. 8 months ago, I was sitting in a doctor's office in downtown Portland, looking at a bill that made me feel sick. $55,000. That was the cost to fix the constant nerve pain that made every step feel like I was walking on crushed glass for the last 4 years. It wouldn't kill me, but it ruined my life. I had spent 5 years putting money away for this. I am a 29-year-old financial analyst. My whole world is built on checking probabilities and stopping losses. I never went on trips. I drove a 12-year-old hatchback that shook whenever I went over 40 miles per hour. I ate cheap noodles for dinner more times than I want to say. Every extra cent went into a high-interest savings account named Medical Fund. When the surgeon gave me the date, I felt like I could finally take a breath. I was going to be free of the hurting. I was going to get my life back. Then my phone started ringing. It was my dad. He wasn't just sobbing, he was gasping for air. I had never heard him sound like that before. He claimed he was in massive trouble, a major legal mess. He talked about loan sharks, a business deal that crashed, and the scary chance of going to federal prison if he didn't get $55,000 by Friday. He begged me. He cried. He used the one tool he knew I couldn't fight. He acted like the helpless dad who tried his hardest. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, my finger resting on the banking app. My analyst brain was yelling that the math didn't make sense. Why is it exactly $55,000? Why that specific number? But the daughter side of me, the part taught to be the safety net, ignored the logic. I told myself I could earn money again, but I couldn't replace a father. With a trembling hand, I moved the whole balance of my medical fund to his bank account. I called the surgeon's office and ended my appointment. I went home and ate noodles, telling myself I did the right thing. I had protected my family. 3 days later, I went to my parents' place to see how he was doing. The house was empty. On the counter in the kitchen, stuck under a pile of junk mail, I saw a piece of thick, expensive, cream-colored paper. It wasn't a court paper. It wasn't a warning from a loan shark. It was a receipt for a non-refundable deposit for a venue at a private island resort. The price was exactly $55,000. The receipt was time-stamped. I had sent the money. I stood there in that quiet kitchen holding the evidence that my physical pain had paid for my sister's ego. He hadn't been in legal trouble. He wasn't going to jail. He just didn't have enough for the deposit for the dream wedding my sister wanted. And he knew I was the only person with cash ready. That was the moment the daughter died and the analyst took control. I didn't start a fight. I didn't call them to yell. I saw that to them, I wasn't a person with my own problems or pain. I was just a backup plan. They could take my money whenever they felt like it. They thought they got away with it because I stayed quiet. They didn't know that in my job, silence doesn't mean I agree. It means I am gathering proof. The theft didn't stop with that initial $55,000. That was merely the first payment on their sense of entitlement. Over the following weeks, I watched my family behave with the arrogance of people who had never heard the word no. My sister treated my apartment like her own personal free store. She had a spare key for emergencies, but the only emergency seemed to be her closet. I would return home from a 10-hour day checking company books only to find empty hangers where my best blazers used to hang. My expensive skin products, the only treats I bought for myself, would vanish from my bathroom shelf. When I asked her about a missing $280 serum, she didn't even try to hide it. She just rolled her eyes and said, "Calm down, Batty, we're sisters. You just go to the office and come home anyway. Who are you even trying to look good for?" She was right about one thing. I didn't go out. I was too busy working extra hours to put money back into the bank account they had wiped out. But hearing her dismissing my entire life while she wore my clothes was a very specific kind of insult. It wasn't just about being greedy. It was the belief that my things were naturally hers because I was naturally less important than her. She saw me as a supply to be used, not a human being to be respected. Then the paperwork arrived. My dad and my mom stopped by on a Sunday. They didn't come to ask how I was handling the pain without my surgery. Instead, they shoved a catering agreement in my face. "The food company is being difficult about our credit check," my dad said, waving his hand as if his terrible credit score wasn't his own fault. "We just need you to sign as a guarantor. It's just a formality. We're family, right? We look out for each other." I looked at the paper. It wasn't a formality. It was a legal promise for another $18,000 if they didn't pay, and I was certain they wouldn't. The bill would come straight to me. I almost laughed. They had already taken my health. Now they wanted to ruin my future credit. But the real breaking point wasn't the money. It was a piece of paper I found on the kitchen table while they were searching for a pen. It was the draft for the reception seating plan. I looked at the top tables. The main table was for my sister, the groom, and the parents. Table 1 was for the groom's rich relatives. Table 2 was for my sister's social media friends. I kept looking, moving further and further down the list until I found my name. I was at table 22. It was in the back corner, right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen and the speakers for the DJ. I was sitting with the photographer's assistant and the band members who weren't playing. I wasn't even listed as the sister of the bride. I was put in the overflow section, hidden away like a dirty secret at a party that I had paid for myself. That was the moment the last bit of guilt I felt as a daughter finally broke. I looked at my dad, who was tapping the contract because he was in a hurry. I looked at my sister, who was looking at her phone, not caring that I was even there. I realized then that I wasn't a member of this family. I was their insurance policy. I was the safety net they walked on to keep their own shoes clean. I spent my life auditing strangers and finding financial fraud. Yet I had missed the theft happening in my own house because I was too close to the situation. I picked up the pen. I didn't sign that catering contract. I realized that if I yelled or fought, they would just call me crazy, lie to me, and cut me off before I could get my money back. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the analyst. "I'll take care of this, Dad," I said, my voice sounding flat and cold. "Actually, why don't I just handle all the vendor contracts? You shouldn't have to stress about the paperwork." My dad looked relieved. He thought he had won again. He didn't know that by giving me the paperwork he was giving me a weapon. I wasn't going to save them. I was getting ready to collect the debt. The next day I started the plan. In my job we have a saying, the most dangerous attack doesn't come from a hacker breaking the firewall. It comes from someone holding the door open for the delivery guy. I decided to be the delivery guy. I walked into my parents' living room with a fake smile and a stack of papers 3 inches thick. My dad was walking back and forth, drinking scotch at 11 in the morning. His credit cards had been denied by the fancy caterer, and he was falling apart. "I fixed it, Dad," I said, putting the papers on the coffee table. "I talked to the vendors. They just need someone to sign. I agreed to co-sign everything so the wedding can happen." He sat down on the couch, and the relief on his face was so obvious it was sad. "Thank God, I knew you'd help out, Batty. You're the sensible one." "There is one condition," I said, keeping my tone light. "Since I'm putting my credit on the line for a $45,000 catering bill, I need to protect myself. It's just standard procedure. I brought a notary, a guy from work named Mark, to watch the signing. It's mostly just papers saying the venue isn't liable." I introduced Mark, who I had hired an hour ago. My dad didn't even look at him. I handed him a pen. The stack of papers was real. There were vendor contracts, liability forms, and insurance papers. But hidden in the middle on page 42 was a document called Deed in Lieu of Foreclosure. attached to a security agreement. The terms were harsh but simple. I was lending him the $55,000, which was now officially a secured loan, plus the catering guarantee. The collateral was the house. If he missed the payment deadline, which was technically yesterday, the title of the house moved to me immediately. "This is a lot of reading," my dad complained, turning a page without actually looking at it. "It's just standard legal talk, Dad, unless you want to call the caterer and explain why you can't pay them." He signed it. He signed the catering papers. He signed the waivers. And then with a fancy pen he signed the deed to his house over to me. Mark stamped the paper. The house belonged to me now. My dad poured another drink, thinking he had tricked his daughter into paying his bills. He had no idea he had just signed his own eviction notice. Phase 3 was my sister. That evening she barged into my apartment while I was packing my bags. "My hair is a complete mess," she said loudly, staring at her own face in the mirror in my hallway. "That salon totally ruined it." She looked at herself and frowned. "It looks so flat, I need some high-quality product." She started digging through the cabinets in my bathroom. I stood by the door and just watched her. I knew exactly what she was trying to find. There was a jar of expensive, limited edition hair mask sitting on the counter. It cost $225. It was the only thing I owned that she hadn't stolen from me yet. Greed is just a reflex for people like her. I've learned that you don't have to force a rat to eat the cheese. You just have to leave it out and make sure it smells like it cost a lot of money. I knew how my sister operated. If I handed it to her, she would think something was wrong. If I tried to hide it, she would want it even more. "Don't touch that," I said, acting like I was annoyed. "I am saving that for myself. It's too expensive for you." She made a mocking sound and grabbed the jar. "Batty, you are sitting at the back table. Nobody is even going to look at your hair. I am the bride. I'm the one who needs this." She didn't bother to open it to check what was inside. If she had, she might have noticed the texture was a bit thinner than it should be. I had poured out the real product and replaced it with a mix of cheap conditioner and a very strong UV-reactive chemical. It wasn't a dye that you could just wash out. It was a styling cream that stayed in the hair to make it look shiny. It looked totally invisible when it dried, but under a specific kind of black light, it would glow like radioactive waste. "Fine," I said, letting out a long sigh like I had lost the argument. "Just make sure the stylist puts it on everywhere. It has to cover every single strand to actually work." "Obviously," she replied, holding the jar like it was a gold trophy. "Thanks for finally being useful for once." She walked out the door carrying the chemical bomb in her hand. I locked the door behind her, grabbed the notarized deed for the house and put it in my briefcase. The trap was ready. Now we just had to wait for the lights to go out. The wedding day arrived with the kind of intense sunshine that wealthy people pay extra to have. The resort on the private island was beautiful, I have to admit that. It was a huge place made of white stone and glass, surrounded by water so blue it looked like it was dyed. But the beauty wasn't the reason they picked it. It was because it was isolated. To get there, guests had to take a 40-minute ride on a ferry. There was no cell phone service, only the resort's Wi-Fi, which I knew barely worked. Once you arrived on the island, you were stuck in paradise. It was perfect. I got there early, wearing a navy blue dress I bought from a clearance rack, the same one my sister called depressing during the rehearsal. I went straight to the main office. Mr. Henderson, the man running the resort, looked up from his tablet and put on a professional smile. "Miss Batty," he said, "we weren't expecting to see you until the ceremony started." "I like to check on my investments, Mr. Henderson," I told him, keeping my voice quiet. "I just want to make sure the wire transfer for the rush fee went through. 3 days ago, when my dad's credit card was declined for the final venue payment, I didn't just give him the cash. I paid the resort directly myself. I had signed a new legal paper." Mr. Henderson tapped on his screen. "It did. We received the $20,000 on Tuesday. You are now listed as the main person in charge of the account for this event. The contract is in your name, including the default clause." The one about stopping all services immediately if the bill isn't paid by the start of the reception, I asked. It is our standard policy, he promised me, though I assume your father is going to take care of the final bar tab. I'm sure he plans to, I said, but keep your staff ready just in case. I walked out of the office feeling the weight of that house deed in my small bag. It felt heavy like a loaded gun. I found my sister in the garden while she was taking pictures. She looked great. Her dress was a massive pile of silk and lace that cost more than my first car, but I only looked at her hair. It was smooth, shiny, and styled perfectly. The hair stylist had done exactly what my sister told her to do. She had rubbed in that expensive cream and used heat to set it. To anyone else, she looked like a model. To me, she looked like a target. She finally got annoyed when she noticed me standing there. Try not to stand too close to me while we take these photos. That dress is a disaster. You look like a giant bruise. You look like you're glowing, I said to her. I know, she said, flipping her hair. The invisible chemicals caught the sunlight. See, I told you I needed the expensive stuff. You were just going to waste it on your split ends. My dad found me near the bar 10 minutes later. He was sweating through his tuxedo. He pulled me behind a flower arch and whispered that his credit card had been flagged for fraud. He asked me if I could cover the deposit for the open bar. I just smiled and told him that I had already taken care of everything. He looked relieved and walked away, never realizing that I hadn't spent a single cent. I had only started the countdown. I went into the sound and light booth, showed my ID and the contract that proved I was the owner of the event, and told a lie about wanting to test a neon lighting surprise for the bride. The worker hit the button, filling the small room with a purple UV glow. It was perfect. I knew exactly when I wanted the music to change, and I wanted it to be brutal. Back in the main room, my sister picked up the microphone. She started talking about how much she valued sacrifice and kindness, all while wearing a $35,000 gown paid for with my pain and my credit. From the dark corners of the room, I watched her. She signaled the DJ to change the lights. The whole ballroom went pitch black. Then the music started thumping with a heavy bass, and the UV lights exploded onto the floor. White shirts turned bright violet. People's teeth looked purple. And right in the middle of the dance floor, my sister's head started glowing a neon green and orange color. The stolen chemical mixture in her hair reacted instantly to the light, and the glowing liquid began to run down her neck, leaving bright stains on her expensive white dress. People started gasping, then they started laughing. Some of her friends from college started shouting that she looked like she had been sprayed with that anti-theft dye they use in banks. My sister kept spinning around, not knowing what was wrong until she caught a glimpse of herself in a window. She started screaming. She tried to claw at her hair, but that only smeared the glowing stains all over her face. My dad came charging into the room, yelling and demanding to know what was going on. But it was too late. Everyone had their phones out. The people with big social media followings were filming everything. The party wasn't a wedding anymore, it was just viral content. When my dad started threatening to sue everyone, the resort manager, Mr. Henderson, walked over very calmly. He told him that he wasn't the client. I was. Following my orders, the staff immediately shut everything down. They stopped the music. They took away the food and the alcohol. They even started packing up the rented chairs. My sister shrieked at me, "This is my wedding." "It was your wedding," I told her, "until you defaulted on the bill." My dad was shaking with rage. Get out of my house," he yelled at me. I pulled the paper out of my bag and put the deed he had signed right on the table in front of him. I explained that his $55,000 loan had officially reached its due date yesterday. Since he didn't pay, the title of the house had transferred to me that morning. I told him he had exactly 24 hours to move his things out. I walked out of the resort while they were all having a complete mental breakdown. Outside, my grandmother was waiting for me in a black car. "Did it work out?" she asked. "The liquidation is finished," I replied. My sister tried to tell a different version of the story online. but the security cameras from the resort proved that she was the one who stole the hair product. The phrase glowing thief bride was the top trend on the internet for days. All her sponsors left her. My parents were kicked out of the house. 2 days after that, I sold the property to a construction company. I used that money to pay for my nerve surgery, and then I started my own company. Now, I run an auditing firm that specializes in getting money back for people who have been financially abused. My family thought I was just a safety net they could use. They forgot that sometimes, when a person doesn't pay their debts, the assets get liquidated.